Chris Graham and Rod Mullins. We're here talking NASCAR, and Rod, you're going to be at Bristol Motor Speedway this coming weekend, and it is the third race in the first round, the third and final race in the first round of the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. And okay, so they're going to be there, bumping and grinding their way. We have a playoff field of 16. It'll be cut down to 12 after the race this weekend. And after what we saw yesterday at Watkins Glen, with so many just poor performances by the playoff field, there's a lot of work that needs to be done by a lot of drivers to get themselves into that final 12.
You are exactly right about that. There's a lot of work that has to be done, and you've got some drivers right now that are on that fringe, on that bubble. There are some that are still kind of safe per se. It's, the upper, I would say the upper seven right now, as long as they hold on in what they're doing. But then from like eighth on through 12th, that's where the shuffling begins. And you start seeing people either gaining some ground or losing some ground. In the case of Chase Briscoe, he gained some ground yesterday, although he didn't win the race, but he did finish in the, I believe, top 10 out of this whole thing. He finished there with Austin Cindric as well. Austin Cindric also made a name for himself, helping himself a little bit more toward the playoffs. But this is where it's hurting people. Okay, as we look at the bubble at 13 on down through 16 right now, if we were sticking with the 16 team race playoff bubble as we're looking at right now, and this is the elimination race, which that's what it is at the Bristol coming up this week. Denny Hamlin, Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr., and Harrison Burton would all four be eliminated out of this. And that would be, from 12 on up, Ty Gibbs, Chase Briscoe, and the rest of the crew. That's what would be going to the playoffs in the next round of the playoffs. But I'm telling you, what really concerns me is we talked about it a little bit in the other podcast. We were talking about the race yesterday and so forth. We've got Denny Hamlin, which people are kind of scratching their heads wondering what kind of strategy is he putting into this thing going into the playoffs. Did he think he was in a comfortable position that he didn't have to worry about it? Sort of a thing like Kyle Busch here several years ago when he said, oh, insurance points or anything like that. I'm beginning to wonder if he had that kind of attitude about it. Brad Keselowski, he's had some things happen to him. The wreck yesterday, of course, at Watkins Glen when William Byron went over top of him, that kind of hurt his chances, dropped him to 14th. But Martin Truex Jr. is probably the one that I'm a little bit surprised with. Truex was running really well yesterday, but then his comments finally, as he got into the post race thing, he's just said, I'm not a fan of these races. I'm not a fan of this whole thing and stuff, because he says people are running all over people. They're running over top of people. And I'm like, I want to say to Martin Truex Jr., you should expect this. If you are not expecting this kind of driving style, then you need to just go ahead and retire now and just end it, because these guys are for blood and these guys are to make a name for themselves. The one I feel really bad for right now, Harrison Burton, doesn't have his ride for next year. Got kicked out from the Wood Brothers and so forth. He's in 16th after that great win here, a couple of weeks ago. Anything's possible. Anything is possible with this whole thing. But right now, the way it looks to me, if things don't change by the time Bristol is over with, or they continue and we get to the post race at Bristol on Saturday night, Denny Hamlin could very well be knocked out of the playoffs, and again, another chance at his first ever Cup championship.
When I look at the standings, I might even go 1 through 10 pretty safe. I mean, certainly 1 through 4, 1 through 5 pretty safe. 1 through 10 all the way down to William Byron. Unless he has just something calamitous happen
Right.
early in that race, at Bristol, he's probably pretty good. But you get down to Chase Briscoe from 11 to 16. You got Burton at 16.
Mhm.
There's a 40-point difference there between those guys. 39-point difference, actually.
Right.
Briscoe and Gibbs are tied right now. Hamlin is on the wrong side of the bubble, 6 points back of those guys.
Mhm.
Brad Keselowski, 6 points back of Hamlin. Truex Jr., 2 points back of Keselowski. It'll be hard. Burton will have to win his way in, I think, at this stage. But you
Yeah.
go from you go from Briscoe to to Truex.
Mhm.
Uh, Anything can happen if one of
Yep.
those guys has obviously a win gets them in, but a top five finish, a top two or three finish, and those guys can play themselves in if they get knocked out early. Lose a couple laps, and don't get back on the lead lap, they could be out. So, man, and with Bristol being what it is,
Mhm.
and that track the way it plays, man, NASCAR set this up to be a fun one for us.
Yeah, and Denny Hamlin kind of came out from the race yesterday, and he kind of said, we run well at Bristol. Well, that's one thing to say that you run well at Bristol, and he won last year at this same time when we were moving into the playoffs and the cutoff point last year, and I agree with him there. But I'm still in this thing of scratching my head, wondering what in the heck are you thinking with this kind of strategy? Is it a strategy? Do you have a strategy going into this last race here, especially at Bristol? What are you going to do? You're going to drive your pants off and try to, go and try to win this thing. That's what all drivers try to do. But are you going to knock everybody out of the way and trying to do it till you're the only one left? The one I'm concerned about, and I don't know if you caught this or not from the race yesterday. I'm worried about Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney took a hit yesterday, and some people might say, well, it's not that much of a hit. But when NASCAR would not let him even look or let the team look at the car to determine what was wrong with it, what had happened, and they towed it back in. They wanted it towed back to the pit and then to the pit box, and then they could go and look at the car. But then at that point, NASCAR said, nope, you're done for the day. So there were some people yesterday that said NASCAR blew that call. Ryan Blaney was one of them. I don't know. Maybe that's something that NASCAR is going to have to take a look at. I don't know what they'll have to do, but I don't see any big rule changes on it. But, yesterday, that little incident there at the beginning of the race, lap one, is really what messed Ryan Blaney up for the rest of the race. And he didn't come back, but you're just wondering, he has another race like that. He's going to be knocked out of this before it's over with. So we've got a lot of tangibles right now with this playoff system. And I'll say this, NASCAR definitely makes it exciting, and it's definitely not something that you are able to predict because it is just as unpredictable as ever.
Blaney's rough day knocked him 7 spots down. He went from being a
Yep.
leader to eighth place. So even if he's good for the round of 12,
Yep.
that certainly that changes everything for him as far as the next cutoff in a few weeks. And then, you talked about William Byron. He lost 6 spots in the
Yeah.
standings. He went from fourth to 10th. So again, whether they're good for this round, okay, they might be good for this round, but there's other playoff cutoffs as well.
Hmm.
And that's the magnification of a bad finish in one of these races can do that to you. Can knock you down from a pretty safe spot to something that's not at all safe.
Well, and Bristol's the kind of place that will do that. Bristol's the kind of place that will go and hurt you quick. And again, back to the Denny Hamlin thing. Just because you've ran well there in the past doesn't mean you're going to run well there on Saturday night because the conditions and everything else. There's going to be so many people that's going to be trying to determine, okay, where do I have to be at in this thing? Where am I going to have to be running up front in order to avoid, the playoffs? And I don't know how some people think about this, but you've got some drivers out there that's probably saying, what do I have to do to get in front of a Denny Hamlin or a Martin Truex to slow them down to keep them from trying to get up front and get more points and, be able to get that win? You've got that going on too. Don't believe for a second that there's not somebody there secretly in their mind saying to themselves, hey, where's Truex? Truex bumped me during the year. I've got a way to pay him back now. So I'm going to go and I'm going to run in front of him as long as I can to slow him down from getting the pace to the front. That'll either get Truex mad to where he either goes and bumps the person out of the way, takes himself out, or he bumps them and he goes on. It's one of those risks that you're going to take on the high banks of Bristol.
So we mentioned, Rod, you will be down in Bristol at Bristol Motor Speedway for us this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
What's the schedule like? What are you going to be doing this weekend down in Bristol?
Well, there's a truck race on Thursday. I don't know if I'm going to be able to cover that one, but definitely on Friday is the Xfinity race. That's going to be a big race right there. But then everything points to Saturday, and that's where everything will, end up. It's a big ado. There are going to be a lot of things going on. There's going to be things promoting this big Speedway Classic that's going to be going on. The tickets just came open, I think, for the window for people to be able to get tickets for the Speedway Classic coming up in August next year. And a lot of it's going to depend on what kind of crowd we have at Bristol. There are going to be some people that are going to say that I'll just stay home, watch the race, but it's not like Bristol. You've got to be there to actually see what's going to unfold. And this is going to be a race of where the teams are going to be working feverishly as much as they can to try to get all the information that they can. This is also a race where from daylight to dark. I mean, you get out there, you have a little bit of sun in the evening right before the race. You have some that comes over, and then the racetrack begins to cool off. And especially with concrete, it cools off pretty quick because it doesn't hold heat that well. But they've got to generate the heat. They're going to have to generate the heat going around that track in order to, stick to the racetrack. And then we hope that they've got the tire problem solved from what they had back in the spring, and those tires were eaten up. I mean, like crazy. Let's just hope Goodyear brings a good tire in this weekend for Bristol, and I'm sure they will. They've learned probably from what happened back in March as to what was going on with the tires.
Well, we will be looking forward to your coverage of the Xfinity race Friday night, NASCAR Saturday night, getting us ready for the next round of the playoffs. For our viewers out there, you just go to AugustaFreePress.com and you'll be able to see the latest from Rod from down in Bristol. Well, Rod, as always, thank you for your time and your insight.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks.